the question becomes within this context, and it's the question that arises then in the individual, well, you know, what is sex? So, well, what is sex? So sex has to be the union, the communion of masculine and feminine, of form and formlessness. And so if I build that out fully, what I can recognize as sex is this moment. Sex is existence. Sex is the very thing that you find your breath and your life in. It's you immersed in it all of the time. So if sex is this moment, then the third tenet of true sex is that the moment is the lover and you are the beloved. And so it is in our willingness to play in the interplay of the flow of mutuality of masculine and feminine, and just simply being willing to let it sort of switch and flow, that we truly are simply opening ourselves and consecrating ourselves to the moment as the lover. And each of us, as a singularity of one living as two, is the beloved. And when we start to play in the moment and we start to stretch the moment open by polarizing, in a sense, who's holding the masculine, who's holding the feminine, then we create a lot of energy, and that energy starts to pulse. And in that pulse, we begin to flow. So the pulse of true sex is always in the breath, and the flow is in the recognition of the mutuality of that duality of masculine and feminine that you are. So to take the example we worked at a little bit earlier, if you're underwater, holding your breath, having fun, see how long can I hold it, and you rise up to the surface and you let the breath out as you rise to the surface. When you reach the surface, you can breathe in. It's the first thing you're going to do. It's the first thing when you emerged from the water of the womb, as you breathed in. You began the pulse and flow. Now we emerge to the surface and we find ourselves in a river. And that river is life. And that river is flowing to an ocean. And that river is held by banks. It's given direction and depth by the banks. And the banks is what I then simply will refer to as the masculine principle, the masculine facet of the moment, the masculine aspect of who it is we are, of what it is that we are, is that aspect of who and what we are that gives direction and depth to the flow. The feminine aspect of who it is that we are, what it is that we are, is that which is the water of the river. It gives the river, it's the power of the river, it's the expression of the river. And that, you know, if we're willing to simply create flow and flow of the river, there are times where it flows sort of deep and wide, and other times where it's narrow and fast, and then there are rapids, there are waterfalls, there are all kinds of experiences in the flow to the ocean. And that's the flow of true sex. Then we arrive in the ocean, and when we arrive in the ocean, the river ceases to be. And we arrive in the glow of the ocean. Well, the ocean can be termed consciousness, can be termed whatever it is that you like. The more I've spoken to people, the more I've recognized that when it comes to sex and sexuality and intimacy, almost everybody wants more of what? More. And the question is more of what? And when I ask them, well, more of what is it that you really want? What there are different ways that people express it, but what it really boils down to is what they want more of is the glow. So how do you get from this half pulse that you're in as an identified self to the full pulse and flow and glow? How do you get to the glow? You've got to find flow. To find flow, you've got to regain your pulse. You've got to reclaim your breath. As you reclaim the breath, and within that there's a whole possibility of teaching all kinds of things about you know, what the essential qualities of the in-breath are and what the qualities of the out-breath are, what the sexual functions of the in-breath are, what the sexual functions of the out-breath are, what the functions of the in-breath for the nervous system, for the central nervous system are, what are the functions of the out-breath for the central nervous system. How is it that you can then, through just playing in the breath, begin to extend yourself right up, and how you can extend yourself right down in the in-breath, how you can create depth, how you can create a vertical moment in which you can actually pulse into life. At the very core of life, everywhere we go, there's a deep, deep yearning to emerge. I simply term the urge to emerge. Everywhere we go, life is emerging. This entire universe is always, it's emerging. It's what's happening in nature, it's happening in your garden, and we can emerge through all kinds of apparent impossibilities. But as long as we don't have the full pulse, the emergence isn't possible. So with the full breath, there's no possibility of emergence from the ground of being into a flow. So there's as I see it, an essential requirement to offer a way of relanguaging our experience of ourselves sexually. And if we can do so in this manner, then what that brings about is that people simply immediately more accessible. You know, if you go out there and I talk to people, and you know, there are many people that just like, they just don't talk about sex. So how are we going to reach those? We have to make it possible for them to talk about it. We have to give them language. You know, I considered a room of 40 people a couple of weeks ago, and I asked the question, I said, who of you have had the birds and the bees talk when you were children? 2 hands went up. And so then I said, okay, cool. Now, who of you had what could be called a positive first sexual experience? 1 hand went up. I asked, who of you have experienced being abused or molested in this room? About 28 and 30 hands went up. So you're not going to reach those people if you don't create safety. And if you don't create that safety, you're not going to reach and into the world and actually bring about the difference that you wish to see in the world. It's just necessary. And as I kind of engage and reach into these people, they're very accessible. I sit down and I speak to people, and I have a conversation about sex with people. Just a little while ago, I spoke to a couple, and they've been married about 25, 30 years. And we're sitting around a dinner table, and we started talking. And we just started talking about pulse and flow and glow, and talking about orgasm and all the different, you know, sort of levels of orgasm and that kind of stuff, and, you know, what you would call sacred spot work. And they left 2 hours later, and they were completely amazed, and they expressed this incredible gratitude, saying, you know what, we've never had a conversation like this anywhere with anybody before. Thank you so much. And they could begin to make sense of their experience. They could begin to make sense of what was obstructing the trust and the intimacy in their relating. So, as we, obviously, there are various ways to just connect people with the whole notion of flow, the whole notion of the interplay of masculine and feminine, and, you know, I just do it all through teaching the breath, because that's really the first thing that we need to remember is our natural, full, complete breath. As we remember our natural, full, complete breath, we automatically reactivate the spirituality of our bodies.